Kang's hand froze mid-motion, knuckles an inch from the door, when Susan's voice cracked through the wood like a blade sliding between his ribs. He had come to end it. The papers were folded twice in his inside pocket. Signed already, his lawyer's number still warm on his phone screen. 3 years of marriage reduced to a stack of paper he hadn't even had the courage to hand her himself. He'd planned to knock, say it plainly, and walk away before she could argue. Instead, he stood there, breath caught, listening to his wife weep in her phone. "I can't keep lying to him, Mom," Susan said, her voice trembling in a way he had never heard before. Not the woman who ran his household with quiet authority, not the woman who negotiated with his enemies over dinner without blinking. This was someone unraveling. "Every time he looks at me like he trusts me, I feel like I'm going to be sick." Kang's pulse slowed to something cold and deliberate. He pressed his back against the wall beside the door frame. Out of sight, papers forgotten. "They sent me to marry him," Susan continued, and something in Kang's chest turned to stone. The Adeyemis. That was the whole plan from the beginning. Get close to Kang Min-jae, learn his operation, feed it back to them. "I didn't think," her voice broke. "I didn't think I'd fall in love with him." If you're already feeling your stomach drop with Kang's, hit that like button right now. And comment the city you're watching from, because this story is about to get a lot more complicated. Subscribe too, because you do not want to miss where this goes. Susan's mother said something on the other end, too low for Kang to catch, but Susan's response came fast, defensive, desperate. "No, Mom, listen to me. I stopped feeding them real information months ago. Everything I've sent the Adeyemis since spring has been false. Wrong shipment dates, wrong locations, fake names. I've been protecting him without him even knowing it. If they ever find out I've been lying to them too, they'll kill me before Kang ever gets the chance to." Kang's jaw tightened. His mind, usually a steel trap of logic and calculation, scrambled to catch up. Every dinner, every night, she'd fallen asleep against his shoulder. Every time she'd stood beside him in front of his men, unshaken loyal. Had any of it been real? Or had he simply been an assignment she'd grown too attached to complete? "I married a stranger to spy on him," Susan said, quieter now, like the confession itself was exhausting her. "And now I'd burn down everything I came from just to keep him safe. What does that make me, Mom?" There was a long pause. Kang held his breath. "It makes you a fool," her mother finally said, sharp and unkind. "A fool who picked the wrong side and is about to get herself killed for it." Susan let out a broken laugh, humorless. "Maybe, but I'd rather die loving him honestly than keep living a lie that protects me." Kang's hand moved on its own, sliding into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing the edge of the divorce papers. 3 minutes ago, they had felt like armor. Now, they felt like a mistake he'd almost made blind. He pushed the door open. Susan spun around, phone slipping from her hand, clattering against the hardwood floor. Her eyes went wide, red-rimmed, caught between shame and terror. "Kang, how long?" he said, voice flat, dangerously calm, the voice his men had learned to fear more than a shouting. "How long have you been lying to me? It's not what you think. Don't." His voice cut through hers like a blade. "I heard everything, Susan. Every word." Her face crumbled. She took a step toward him, hands trembling. "Then you heard the part where I said I've been protecting you. That I stopped working for them. That everything I've given them for months has been false. You were still working for them." Kang snapped, the calm finally splintering. "From the beginning, our marriage, was that ever real, or was I just a job?" "It started as a job," Susan admitted, tears spilling freely now. "I won't lie to you about that. Not anymore. But it stopped being a job a long time ago, Kang. I fell in love with you. I've spent the last 6 months risking my life to protect yours, and if you can't see that, then maybe you really were about to walk out that door for nothing." Kang's eyes dropped to the folded papers still in his hand. His grip tightened until the edges crumpled. "The Adeyemis," he said slowly, dangerously. "They sent you, which means they still think you're loyal to them." Susan wiped her face, nodding. "They don't know I've turned. If they find out, they won't just come after you. They'll kill me first to send a message." Kang stared at her for a long moment, torn between the fury of betrayal and the terrifying possibility that the only person who had truly protected him this past year was the one he'd just been ready to throw away. Then we don't have much time, he said finally, voice hard. Because if they're already suspicious enough to make you cry on the phone to your mother, they're already moving. As if summoned by the words themselves, his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He answered it without breaking eye contact with Susan. His second-in-command's voice was tight, urgent. Boss, we have a problem. The Adeyemis just pulled all their men from the East Docks. Nobody's seen them in 20 minutes. Kang's blood ran cold. They weren't just suspicious. They were already making their move. If this story already has you gripped, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and smash that like button, because what happens next is going to change everything. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Kang ended the call and turned to Susan, his expression unreadable, the fury from moments ago folding itself away beneath something colder and more useful. Urgency. Get your coat, he said. Now. Kang, wait. Susan reached for him, but he was already moving toward the hallway, barking orders into his phone to men scattered across the city. She followed, pulling her coat from the rack with shaking hands. You still don't trust me. I can see it on your face. I don't have the luxury of trusting anyone right now, Kang said without looking back, including myself. 20 minutes ago, I was standing outside your door with divorce papers in my pocket. Now I'm supposed to believe you've been risking your life to protect mine for 6 months straight. Believe it or don't, Susan snapped, some of her old steel returning to her voice. But right now, the Adeyemis pulling out of the docks means one of two things. Either they're regrouping to hit you somewhere else, or they already know I've turned, and they're coming for both of us. Kang stopped in the doorway, jaw tight. Which do you think it is? Susan's silence answered before her words did. I think, she said slowly, that my mother's phone has been tapped for the last 3 weeks. I warned the Adeyemi's informant myself, back before I switched sides. If they were smart enough to still have someone listening, they heard every word I just said to her. Kang's stomach dropped. If the call had been intercepted, then the Adeyemis didn't just suspect Susan's betrayal. They knew. Then they're not moving on my operation first, Kang said, already reaching for his car keys. They're moving on you. The drive to his safe house across the city was silent except for the hum of tires against wet asphalt and the occasional burst of static from Kang's radio as his men reported in. Susan sat rigid in the passenger seat, hands clenched in her lap, watching the streetlights blur past like warnings she couldn't quite read. Say something, she finally whispered. What do you want me to say, Susan? Kang's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. That I forgive you? That none of this matters because you switched sides eventually? You lied to me for years. You let me trust you completely while feeding information to men who would have loved nothing more than to see me dead. And then I stopped, Susan said, voice rising. I stopped because somewhere along the way, pretending to love you turned into actually loving you, and I couldn't live with myself anymore. Do you know what it's like to wake up every single day next to someone you're supposed to be using and realize you'd rather die than see them hurt? Kang didn't answer. His silence was its own kind of answer, heavy and unresolved. His phone rang again. This time it was Officer Daniels. No, not Daniels, his man Toby, stationed outside Susan's mother's apartment as a precaution the moment Kang had given the order. Boss, Toby said, breathless. Her mother's place, it's been hit. 2 men moved fast, in and out in under 3 minutes. Susan's hand flew to her mouth. Is she? She's alive, Toby said quickly. Shaken up but alive. They weren't there to kill her. They left a message. What message? Kang demanded. They said, Toby hesitated. They said tell Susan the family doesn't forgive traitors, and tell Kang he married a woman who already buried him once in her mind. The words hit Susan like a physical blow. She sank back into the seat, tears spilling silently down her face. They know, she whispered. They know everything. Kang's hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles ached. Whatever fury he still carried towards Susan's deception had to be shelved now, buried beneath the immediate, screaming need to survive the next 24 hours. Listen to me, he said, voice hard but steady. Whatever happens between us, we deal with after tonight. Right now the Adeyemis think they have the upper hand because they believe you're isolated, unprotected, and desperate. We use that. Susan looked at him, startled. Use it how? You said you've been feeding them false information for months, Kong said. That means you know exactly how they verify their intelligence, who their informants are, how they communicate. If we're going to survive this, I need everything you know. Now, for the first time since he'd opened that door, something like hope flickered across Susan's face. You're not going to shut me out. I don't have room to shut you out, Kong said grimly, pulling the car into a narrow alley behind an unmarked building. Not when you might be the only person who can help me stop what's coming. If your heart is racing right now, that's exactly where it should be. Like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because the next part of the story is where everything comes to a head. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because you are not going to want to miss what Susan reveals next. Inside the safe house, the air smelled of gun, oil, and old coffee. Kang's men moved with quiet efficiency around them, sealing windows, checking exits, murmuring updates into radios. Susan sat at a metal table in the center of the room, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched, while Kong paced in front of her like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. Start from the beginning, he said. Everything. Names, dates, drop points. All of it. Susan took a shaking breath. The Adeyemi family works through a courier system. Nobody communicates directly with the patriarch, Chief Adeyemi. Everything runs through his nephew, Tund. I was supposed to report to a woman named Ronk, posing as a hairdresser 3 blocks from your old warehouse. I gave her false information for the last 5 months. Wrong ship dates, decoy addresses, names of men who don't even work for you anymore. And if they intercepted your call to your mother, Kong said, they'll know Ronk's been compromised too. Susan nodded slowly, which means they'll burn that channel and go straight to Tund. And if Tund is moving men already, that means Chief Adeyemi authorized this personally. He doesn't send his own nephew out for anything less than a direct order. Kong stopped pacing. That's not retaliation for information. That's an execution order. The room went silent, except for the low hum of a generator somewhere in the building. Susan's eyes filled again, but she blinked the tears back, jaw tightening with a resolve Kong hadn't seen from her since the night they'd first met. The night he'd mistaken her calculated composure for genuine strength, never realizing how much of it had been real all along. Then we don't wait for them to come to us, Susan said. We go to Tund first. Kong studied her, something shifting behind his eyes. You almost sound like you belong in this world. I've been living in it for 3 years, Kong, Susan said quietly, whether either of us wanted to admit it or not. His phone buzzed again. This time a message was short, and it made his blood run cold. A photo. Ronk, the hairdresser Susan had just named, lying motionless in the back room of her salon, a single gunshot wound to the temple. Susan gasped when he turned the screen toward her. They already moved. They're not just retaliating, Kong said grimly. They're erasing every trace of the operation before it can be traced back to Chief Adeyemi. Which means I'm next, Susan finished, voice hollow. Kong crouched in front of her chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. Whatever anger still lingered from the betrayal was being rapidly overtaken by something else entirely. A fierce, unwilling protectiveness that scared him more than the Adeyemis did. You are not next, he said, low and certain. Not while I'm breathing. Susan's lips parted in surprise. An hour ago you were ready to divorce me. An hour ago, I didn't know you'd spent 6 months lying to dangerous men to keep me alive, Kong said. I'm still angry, Susan. I don't know if I can trust you the way I did before all this. But I'm not going to let Chief Adeyemi put a bullet in you because you chose me over your own family. Before Susan could respond, the door burst open. Toby rushed in, face pale, breathless. Boss, we have a situation. Tund's men, they're not heading for the docks or the warehouse. They're headed here. Someone gave up this location. Kang's head snapped up. That's impossible. This safe house isn't in any of our files. Only a handful of people even know it exists. Toby's expression turned grim. That's what worries me, boss. Because if it wasn't leaked from your side, you didn't need to finish the sentence. Every eye in the room turned slowly toward Susan. Her face went white. I didn't tell anyone. Kong, I swear to you I didn't. Then how? Kong said, voice dropping to something dangerously quiet, Do the Adiemis know exactly where we are? Susan's mind raced, panic rising in her throat, when realization hit her like ice water down her spine. My phone, she whispered. Kong, my phone. I dropped it back at the apartment when you walked in. I never picked it back up. Kang's stomach twisted. You left your phone behind. Unlocked. They didn't need to tap my mother's line, Susan said, horror dawning across her face. They tracked my phone the second I left it behind. They've known our location this entire time. Outside, the distant sound of engines grew louder, tires screeching against wet pavement, closing in fast. Kang's men scrambled into position, weapons drawn, shouting coordinates to each other as the safe house plunged into controlled chaos. Kang grabbed Susan by the arm, pulling her toward the reinforced back room, his voice sharp with adrenaline. Whatever happens in the next 10 minutes, he said, you stay behind me. Do you understand? Susan's hands trembled, but her eyes met his with a fierce, unshaken resolve. I didn't survive 3 years pretending to be someone. I wasn't just to die hiding behind you now, Kang. If they're coming for both of us, then we face them together. Outside, the first gunshot rang out. If this story has your pulse racing, you already know what to do. Like this video right now, and drop a comment telling me exactly where in the world you're watching from. Because the final part of this story is about to change everything you thought you knew about Susan and Kang. Subscribe before you go, because the ending is coming, and you do not want to miss it. Gunfire tore through the night, shattering the front windows of the safe house as Kang's men returned fire in tight, practice bursts. Kang shoved Susan behind an overturned steel table, his body angled over hers, shielding her from the chaos erupting around them. Stay down, he growled, drawing the pistol from his waistband. Kang, there are too many of them, Susan shouted over the noise. Tun wouldn't send this many men just to kill me. He's here himself, isn't he? As if summoned by her words, a voice cut through the gunfire, amplified, calm in a way that made the chaos feel almost rehearsed. Kang Min-jae, Tun's voice called out from beyond the doorway. I only came for the woman. Hand her over, and your men live to see morning. Susan's breath caught. Kang's grip on his weapon tightened until his knuckles whitened. You hear that? He said quietly, not looking away from the door. He wants you to think this is simple. A trade. One life for the rest. Maybe it should be, Susan whispered, panic and guilt warring in her voice. Kang, if I walk out there, this ends. Your men live. You live. Kang turned to her sharply, fury flashing behind his eyes. Don't you dare finish that sentence. I brought this to your doorstep. You brought me 6 months of protection I didn't even know I needed, Kang snapped. You think I'm going to hand you over to the same men who taught you that loyalty gets you killed? No. We end this tonight, together or not at all. Before Susan could argue further, Toby's voice crackled through Kang's earpiece. Boss, East Corridor is clear. If we move now, we can flank Tun's position before his men regroup. Kang's mind snapped into focus, years of instinct taking over. Susan, can you still reach Ronk's old contact? The backup line she mentioned, the one Tund doesn't know is compromised. Susan blinked, startled. The backup line only reports twice a month. If I use it now, then Tund won't expect a message coming through it, Kang finished. Send word that Chief Adeyemi's location has been compromised by rival factions. Make it urgent. Make it believable. Susan's hand shook as she pulled a burner phone from her coat pocket, fingers flying across the screen. If this doesn't work, it has to, Kang said, already moving toward the East Corridor, weapon raised. Because in about 90 seconds, Tun's men are going to storm this room, and I need his focus somewhere else. The message sent. Susan pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering, as the sound of Kang's men moving into position echoed through the safe house. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then abruptly radio chatter erupted outside. Tun's men shouting, confused, some breaking formation entirely. It's working, Toby's voice crackled excitedly. Tun just pulled half his men back. They think their boss's territory is under attack. Kang seized the opening, moving fast and silent through the corridor, his men falling into formation behind him. What followed was brutal and swift, controlled chaos giving way to decisive, calculated violence as Kang's men overwhelmed Tun's disoriented forces. Within minutes, the gunfire outside slowed, then stopped entirely. When Kang finally stepped back into the room, blood on his knuckles but very much alive, Susan rushed toward him, relief and terror colliding across her face. "You're alive," she breathed, hands trembling as she reached for him. "We're alive," Kang corrected, pulling her into an embrace that neither of them questioned. For a long moment, neither spoke, the adrenaline slowly bleeding out of them both, replaced by something rawer, more fragile. "Tun's in custody," Toby reported, jogging in moments later. "But boss, there's something you need to hear." Before we grabbed him, Tun said something strange. He said Chief Adeyemi never authorized this attack personally. Kang pulled back from Susan, brow furrowing. "Then who did?" Toby hesitated, glancing at Susan almost apologetically. "He said the order came from inside your own organization, boss. Someone close to you fed the Adeyemis Susan's location from the very beginning, long before tonight." The room went silent. Susan's face drained of color as Kang's expression hardened into something dangerous and unreadable. "That's impossible," Kang said slowly. "Only a handful of people know the details of Susan's original assignment." "Exactly, boss," Toby said grimly. "Which means whoever set this entire thing in motion is still standing right beside you." Kang's eyes swept the room. His most trusted men, the ones who had fought beside him only moments ago, now each a silent, terrifying question mark. Susan grabbed his arm, voice barely above a whisper. "Kang, if someone inside your own circle orchestrated all of this from the start, then this isn't over. It's only just beginning." Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, and somewhere in the shadows of the safe house, someone who had fought at Kang's side all night quietly slipped their phone back into their pocket. A message already sent, a new plan already in motion. If this ending just left you speechless, you already know what to do. Like this video right now, and comment below exactly where in the world you're watching from. This community deserves to know how far this story reached. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because part 2 is coming, and trust me, the traitor closest to Kang is about to be revealed.